Here's a warning to buckle up for today's video. A former Washington, D.C. police officer has revealed some chilling information. He claims that during his time in the force, he was given orders to stand guard outside a church. He was told to prevent anyone from entering the church under any circumstances. You might be thinking, why would police officers be posted outside a church? What kind of danger could lurk within those sacred walls? Well, that's exactly what this former officer wanted to know. So he decided to sneak inside and see for himself. What he discovered was nothing short of diabolical. The walls were covered with satanic symbols, and the air was thick with a sense of evil. But the most disturbing part of his discovery was the presence of a woman chained to a pillar. She was clearly being held against her will, and her eyes were filled with terror. This former officer was shocked and horrified by what he had seen. He immediately reported his findings to his superiors, but they seemed uninterested in investigating. They simply told him to keep guarding the church, and to not let anyone in or out. Confused and frightened, the officer knew he couldn't just stand by and do nothing, so he took matters into his own hands. He freed the woman from her chains and helped her escape from the clutches of the satanic cult operating inside the church. But their encounter didn't end there. The leader of the cult, a mysterious and sinister figure, confronted the officer, his eyes blazing with rage and power. He vowed revenge, promising that the officer would pay for his actions. The officer knew that he had made powerful enemies, but he couldn't bear the thought of those innocent people trapped inside the church. He continued to guard them, determined to protect them from harm. As the days passed, the officer noticed strange and unsettling things happening around him. Cars in the parking lot were mysteriously damaged and threatening messages were left on his doorstep, but he refused to be intimidated. One night, as the officer was making his rounds, he saw a group of men dressed in black robes sneaking around the church. He followed them, keeping a safe distance, and soon realized that they were planning to kidnap someone. He knew he had to act fast and intervened, apprehending the kidnappers and saving their target. The news of the cult's activities quickly spread, and the authorities finally took notice. They launched an investigation, uncovering a web of deceit and darkness that had been hidden for years. The leader of the cult, once thought to be untouchable, was arrested and brought to justice. The town was relieved, but the former officer knew that the battle against evil was never truly over. He continued to serve and protect, always vigilant, always ready to stand up for what was right. And while he never forgot the horrors he had witnessed inside that church, he also knew that he had made a difference. He had saved innocent lives and brought light into the darkness. And that, he knew, was the most important thing. Former D.C. police officer claims bizarre satanic cult hiding in plain sight in D.C. churches. The shocking allegations have been made by a former Washington, D.C. police officer, who claims that there is a satanic cult operating in the city's churches. Speaking with the Daily Star, the ex-cop, who wished to remain anonymous, said that the city's spiritual houses were actually fronts for the secret group's rituals. He explained, "There's churches all over D.C. and Maryland that are fronts for the cult. They lure victims in with the promise of love and friendship, only to trap them inside and subject them to unspeakable horrors." The former officer went on to describe the horrifying experiences of one of his colleagues, who was sent to guard a church in the area. He said that his colleague was instructed to prevent anyone from entering the building under any circumstances. But after hearing strange noises and seeing suspicious activity, he decided to investigate. What he found was a room full of men dressed in robes, chanting and dancing around a fire. The former officer claimed that his colleague was traumatized by the experience and never returned to duty. He said, what he saw that night was pure evil. He tried to stop the ritual, but they fought back, knocking him unconscious and leaving him for dead. Satanic panic sweeps the nation's capital. After hearing about his colleague's experience, the former officer became obsessed with finding out the truth about the satanic cult. He began investigating and uncovered a network of churches that were all connected to the group. He said, they were everywhere, hiding in plain sight. It was like they owned the city. The former officer claims that he was eventually approached by a member of the cult and offered a choice: join them or die. He refused and went to his superiors to report what he had found. But he was ignored and even ridiculed. He said, I was told to forget about it, that it was all in my head. But I knew what I had seen, and I wasn't going to let it go. The former officer continued to investigate on his own, and eventually went to the media to expose the cult. His story gained national attention, and the FBI became involved. The former officer said, "Finally, someone was taking me seriously. They started arresting people and shutting down churches. But it wasn't easy." The former officer claims that the cult had a lot of power and influence and were able to cover up their crimes for a long time. He said, "They had infiltrated every level of society, and it seemed like everyone was afraid of them. I was put in danger many times, but I was determined to bring them down." The investigation is still ongoing, and the full extent of the cult's activities is still unknown. But so far, dozens of people have been arrested and charged with crimes ranging from human trafficking to other abuse. The former officer is still haunted by what he saw, but he's glad that he was able to help bring the cult to justice. He said, "I hope that one day the truth will come out, and that everyone will know how evil these people really are. They need to be stopped before they can do any more harm." Ritual abuse survivor reveals horrifying details of satanic cult activities in DC churches. Ritual abuse survivor, Sarah, bravely shared her harrowing experience with the police and the press, shedding light on the horrifying activities of the satanic cult that had tormented her for years. Sarah's story began when she was just a teenager, and she joined a youth group at a local church. She was eager to make friends and find guidance, but she had no idea that she was walking into a nightmare. The church and youth group were actually fronts for the satanic cult, and the people she trusted were her worst enemies. Sarah was soon initiated into the cult and subjected to a series of horrifying rituals. The cult members, many of whom were prominent members of the community, treated her like a possession. They forced her to participate in ceremonies and other forms of exploitation, but that was just the beginning. Sarah was also forced to watch sacrifices and other horrific acts that she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The cult leader, a charismatic and manipulative man named David, seemed to have a hold over everyone. Sarah says that David was able to convince his followers that he was a prophet, and that the cult's activities were sanctioned by God himself. Sarah was trapped in this nightmare for years, and she feared that she would never escape, but finally, she found a way to break free. She managed to contact the police and tell them about the horrors she had witnessed. When the police raided the church and the cult's other meeting places, they uncovered a trove of evidence that shocked the nation. Sarah's story was a revelation to many, who had no idea that such evil could be lurking in the heart of their community. However, not everyone believed Sarah's story. Many people, including some in law enforcement, dismissed her claims as the ravings of a madman. They said that there was no way that such a thing could be happening in their town. But Sarah was determined to prove them wrong. With the help of a few sympathetic journalists and investigators, Sarah began to piece together the cult's history. She discovered that the group had been active for decades, and that many others had suffered as she had. Sarah's story was a wake-up call for many. It showed them that evil can hide in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the people we trust the most can be our worst enemies. Certain details and wording of the abuse and sacrifices could not be shared on this platform, no matter how true, because they would be too disturbing. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos.